it. Go and Google it. And then they say, basically, yeah, we did it. We know that we've created problem and hardship today for you. And, well, we'll try to do better, was essentially what they said. But nothing in this country was said about it. Are you following me here? Isn't that odd? You have a whole country, everybody is all in the newspapers. They had a series of lecturers sent to me. But in my country, well, not really, but it's Thomas. Let's not forget Thomas. Yeah. Thomas, I actually close out my book with a soliloquy from Thomas Jefferson. You know, the thing about this particular soliloquy is a statement he said, "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I consider that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever." You see, he knew. He experienced up close and personal cognitive dissonance is what he experienced. And I remember when the big DNA scandal happened, everybody started clutching the pearls. Lord. Not our Thomas. As if, right? And everybody knew about Sally Hemings. Everybody, my grandmother used to talk about Sally Hemings. This was no news to us. But white people started clutching the pearls. Lord, Lord, Lord. And here's the irony. Everyone thought, and it is amazing how the distraction happened. You know, everybody started looking at, because it was all about their Jeffersons. We have DNA to prove it now. They should be able to be buried in the grave with the rest of the Jeffersons. It wasn't about graves, baby. They don't care about your bones. They want to know about right of inheritance. That wasn't about, but see how we got this, even the black folks going, I want to be buried. A fool? What are you thinking? This is right of inheritance. That was the real fear, so they gave you the smoke screen. And then, you know, it's what's amazing about this, and I love that, you know, Dr. Reed talks about this whole idea. It's just going to fold so well into what I'm going to present around the issue of rape and this sort of thing. Because that's why I focus in terms of the dehumanization on rape and lynching. And the thing that's so amazing about this is as we look at it, how many people here, I've done this for, like, this got to be moving on 15, almost 20 years. How many people have ever physically met a white Washington? Okay, go on and do the math on that. Okay, just go on and do that. You know George well, anyway. We all know he was sneaking out back to the black slave business. We all knew that for certain. And then they said, well, he didn't have any children. I said, well, I beg to differ. So let's look at what Thomas said. And I think this is even more telling. Thomas said that blacks smell bad and were physically unattractive. Well, this is a little inconsistent with his behavior, isn't it? He said they required less sleep. Now, that was one, as a social scientist, I was more interested in. He said we required less sleep. So he was experiencing some level of dissonance to come up with such a foolish thing. But why would he have to believe that? What part of him needed to believe we required less sleep? What was the work day for a slave? Sunrise to... Oh, you emotional black people. What empirical evidence do you have to support that? It's just mere emotionalism and conjecture. You don't know that they work that hard. Isn't that amazing? Because that's what they do to us, you see. That's what they say. Well, you have no empirical evidence of that. Well, actually, we do, because once again, we have CSI. And recently, they unearthed a burial ground in New York on Wall Street, in the shadow of the bull. And they unearthed what they saw in those bones. One, lots of children and infants. Infant mortality rate was high. Then they would see injuries to like a large frame man, black man. And the injury would show that the muscle actually detached itself from the bone as a result of exertion. Not injury, exertion. That means he worked so hard, the muscle detached itself from the bone. And nobody does that on purpose. But you might do it if there's a gun trained on you from sunrise to sunset. And then you could just ask the slaves. So you can go to the library. There are thousands and thousands of slave narratives. I just pulled this one out of the Library of Congress. Sarah Gudger said, never known nothing but work, never knew rest, felt like my back was going to break. This is the gospel truth. So they told us, you see. So the other thing he said, he says we were dumb cowardly, and incapable of feeling grief. You see, these are the things that I think we need to zero in on. What dissonance was he experiencing? Because, you know, he was trembling for the country. What dissonance was he experiencing that he would need to believe we were incapable of feeling grief? Why would Thomas Jefferson need to believe that so he could go to sleep at night? What was he doing? He was separating mothers and fathers and children from their parents and wives from husbands. And he said, surely they cannot feel grief. That would make them like me. And so to reconcile that dissonance, he said we simply don't feel grief. Are you following me? See, this stuff is so thick in terms of how deep it is. Then we have the bastion of education coming in to lend its, hand in basically removing any feeling of dissonance. Problem of the Negro, this is taken from a textbook. The problem of the Negro, the Indian, and all the other uncivilized races is essentially the same. Problem is how a relatively large mass of people inferior in culture and perhaps also in nature can be adjusted relatively to the civilization of a people much their superior in culture. How the industrially inefficient nature man can be made over into the industrially efficient civilized man. We're just trying to help y'all. White man's burden, manifest destiny. You see, this is to remove the what? The dissonance. So we're not doing anything wrong here. We're just trying to bring you all along. And then there was, of course, the history of eugenics, which happened, right, when folks got freed. And they were just trying to basically breed better human beings. And they identified the groups that had bad blood, such as Southern Europeans, they're dark. Jews, well, they're dark too. Africans and Latinos were predisposed to defective genes. How many of you saw Rabbit-Proof Fence? It's not an easy movie to see. It's all about Aboriginal people and this whole idea of eugenics. It was ended officially in 1970. Then there's J. Marion Sims. This is an individual right now. There's a statue of him in Central Park, which there are protests to bring down. Those of you that are not familiar with the work of Harriet Washington, book came out, I think, in 07 or 08, maybe. Harriet Washington wrote a book called Medical Apartheid. And those of you that are familiar with the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, child's play. What she unearths is difficult to read. I read the first 100 pages and started having nightmares. Okay, I just need you to know that what she unearthed, and she starts indicting a lot of folks, Johns Hopkins, notable institutions. I mean, think about centuries of total, absolute access to a people to do with them whatever you want. And science played a high hand in that. J. Marion Sims, and this is where it becomes very important. J. Marion Sims was a physician in the mid-1800s who was credited with the creation of the first vaginal speculum, which was made from a pewter spoon. Sims had built a makeshift hospital in his backyard where he conducted surgical experiments on countless unanesthetized African slave women. So he would cut into black enslaved African women and basically say they don't need any anesthesia because their race makes them more durable. And thus they are well suited for painful medical experimentation. Now this becomes a very important piece to look at, because when we start looking at that whole issue of rape hysteria, let me give you some numbers so we can be clear about that. According to the mid-1800s census, there were over 600,000 mixed-race babies born in the United States. 600,000. This was during miscegenation, which meant that it was illegal to marry someone of another race. So folks were sneaking out back a lot, you think? But you see, who then are we afraid of as being the rapist? Isn't it interesting how the focus changed? Because sheer numbers bear out who's raping whom. Very clear. But this becomes something that they cannot escape. I did a talk for New Jersey School of Dentistry and Medicine. And during the break, I talked about J. Marion Sims. And as I was walking down the corridor, peripheral vision, there are these museum cases, glass cases, and in them are crude instruments. like wrought iron looking stuff. And I'm thinking, no, it can't be. And there they were, the instruments of J. Marion Sims. I confronted the president and I said, these are the torture items of my Holocaust. How dare you display them in this way? And if you are going to display them, then tell the truth about how they were created and the monster he was. They certainly wouldn't have the instruments of Holocaust for Jews displayed in such a way. You follow me? But we walk by so ignorant of who we are. And this man is glorified, who literally experimented. And my question was, where did he get these women from? Where did they come from? He got them from slave masters who brought these women to him, and they said that these women, quote, are not fit for duty. They suffered from what he termed, a particular disorder, an obstetric fistula. An obstetric fistula is a breakdown of tissue in the vaginal wall, frequently as a result of childbirth. In other words, enslaved African women would bear down, and when they would push, there was no one there to, one, give them anesthesia or do an episiotomy or help when they tore. So they would tear all the way through, clear to the bladder. This particular disorder causes leakage of both urine and feces because once it heals, it does heal, but there's gaps in the skin, you see. So the urine and feces drip all the way through into the vagina, which made for an uncomfortable, unbearably miserable life, but also a smelly existence. However, this condition did not preclude them from picking cotton and working the fields, cleaning, feeding animals. So what then were they unfit for? Well, the obvious answer is that while black slave women were required to do manual labor alongside their black male counterparts, one of their other inescapable duties was to also sexually serve their masters. Their malodorous condition made them less sexually desirable and thus unfit for duty. And here's an important thing to know, because we have to also make laws so that people are no longer culpable or in any way guilty for raping a black woman. So they said it was impossible for a black woman to be raped under law because the regulations of laws to the white race on the subject of sexual intercourse do not and cannot, for obvious reasons, apply to slaves. Their intercourse is promiscuous. So black women could not even be raped, you see, in a court of law. But they weren't the only ones to suffer under Sims' reign. Black infants were the most innocent of victims. They suffered from what is called trismus nascentium, now commonly referred to as neonatal tetanus. Tetanus originates in horse manure, the likely cause of the disease in slave infants, given their living conditions and proximity to animal stables. Sims, however, attributed this condition to the indecency and intellectual flaws of black slaves, together with skull malformations at birth. He attempted to treat this malady by trying to pry the bones into alignment with the use of a shoemaker's awl. I was careful to get one from 1800s. So he would put that into the skulls of brand new infants in an effort to realign their skulls because of the intellectual flaws and indecency of their parents. 100% fatality rate. And here's the irony. He caused the disease. He and others like him. But you see, y'all are free. Why are you talking about this? So then this is basically the worst picture in my book. The pictures you're going to see are not in the book. This is, of course, a man who's being beaten. Those are keloids, or the overhealing of skin. Often used as actually a form of almost tattooing in certain African countries. And what we're looking at here is a man who's been beaten, because each one of those represents tearing actually into the skin. So he's got a lot of beatings going on here. And I began to wonder, how many people got beaten to death? I mean, they beat this man severely, and he lived. But what if he did beat someone to death? What then? Well, we have to create a law that absolves you of any kind of guilt. So we created the Casual Killing Act, just in case you beat someone to death. And if any slave resists his master, owner, or other person by his or order correcting such slave and shall be happen to be killed